Welcome to the tutorial for authentication for the VP Networks Gateway Controller NC-3610. We're going to cover some basic setup for your authentication system that controls really the branding for your service, how people connect, what they need to connect in terms of service or passwords. We'll cover the basic setup for that. So the most basic way to set up authentication is to use automatic authentication. And what this system does is it looks for incoming requests, and any device that the gateway detects as making a web request using HTTP is automatically added to the system. So one of the limitations is that some devices are not capable of making a web request, like an Xbox in some cases, or music players or Rokus, or sometimes they do, so it can be hard to predict. But the limitation of the system is that if they don't make a web request, they won't be able to get connected. So let's see if I'm currently connected. So I'm not connected right now. So if I go to an application that doesn't generate a web request, like say I send out a ping to Google. So even though I'm making a web request, it's not going to add me to the authentication system where I can be listed as a current user, tracked, controlled in terms of bandwidth, blacklisted, those sorts of features that current users have until I make a web request. So if I do that, so now I'm connected to the system. If I go back to my current user table, here I am, and now my connection will go through normally. So where this can affect users is if they try to send an email without connecting, or like I said, some kinds of devices. So some ways you can work around that is if someone connects with a device like an Xbox and they're not able to generate a web request, and this really can work for any device, that even if you're using login pages or a more sophisticated authentication method, is that you can go to the DHCP table, and if you know the MAC address, if you know the IP address of that particular device, you can click on the pass-through tab, add them to the pass-through list automatically, and then that way, once you click on this, then they'll get added to the firewall in such a way that they won't need to generate that web request. Some devices like iPhones, when people go to the iTunes store, may be smart enough to figure out that they need to log in and they're not connected. So those devices may spawn an HTTP request. HTTP is also a very popular protocol, so devices may be sending all kinds of HTTP traffic that could be detected. So the next authentication method that we can look at that's also pretty simple is just to use a terms of service. And this is an authentication page where there's no passcode, individual users aren't tracked, it's just an enforced terms of service page. So let's go ahead and configure that, and we'll restart our gateway. Now, to use the terms of service page, you'll need to get a meaningful terms of service from the site. So whatever their legal terms of service is that they want to enforce, or if you have a terms of service that that you're providing as a system integrator, you'll need to put that on the system, and I'll show you how to do that. When you reboot your gateway, it doesn't always take the full 60 seconds. So let's see if it's up. Yeah, sometimes it boots a little bit faster than that. And so the way you can get this simple access with no codes, though you'll still be able to track the users. And I don't think I'm a current user anymore. Right, I just rebooted, so I'm not a user anymore. So to put in your terms of service, you'll need to go to customization and go to the upload pages. And in this table is all of the files on the system. And they're basically sorted by the authentication method. So the internal portal uses internal portal HTM, terms of service uses terms of service HTM. So if we go, and the best way to get the template file for this terms of service file is just to download it, put it in a directory where you can find it again, and then open it up to edit it. So I have a terms of service file here that I can edit. What you use to edit your web pages is up to you. The simplest is just to use a text editor. If you're using a more sophisticated editor to do, web design, and you want to add, buttons and tables and that kind of functionality, just be careful that it's not adding a lot of extra code. Particularly if you accidentally use something like Microsoft Word, you'll end up with a file that the system probably won't recognize. So here's what that text file looks for terms of service. If you're not a web designer, you don't need to worry about all this this extra web code. You just need to put your terms in here. So let's make our terms a system. Please don't abuse the system. So we'll save that. So now we have our new terms of service. And then to replace these files, you need to upload a file with the same name. If you give it a new name, it'll get added to this file list. But terms of service.htm is the only file that's used by the system. So let's load our new terms of service HTM, upload that. The way you can double check that you did it correctly is if this default button turns blue. That means you can reset back to the original template file. If this button is still red, and at the bottom you have a button down here that's lowercase t terms of service.htm, then you'll need to go and just make sure you're uploading the same file. So now let's go ahead and let's try to log on again, and we can see our custom terms of service. We've got a Holiday Inn banner too. I'll talk about banners in a minute. So if I accept the terms of service, I can get on the internet, and that works fine. So I pointed out we had that banner. You can see here I've loaded a custom banner. The default banner in the system, if I default it, let's go ahead and default it. And then I'm still a user, so an easy way to kick yourself off the system is to go to 1111. That'll log you out, and then we can reload the terms of service. And now you see this is our generic banner. But like you saw before, I had a Holiday Inn banner. So whatever the branding is for the site, if you load that banner, it will tend to appear on all of these default internal pages. So that's true for the internal portal page and the other default pages as well. So returning to security, we can change it to local authentication. Local authentication is really where the bulk of the functionality is. If you want to use access codes, if you want to use shared accounts, or you want to use prepaid cards, those all become local authentication based login systems. So let's go ahead and set this to local authentication. So it takes a little less than a minute again. And so the first thing that you'll want to do when you set up the local authentication is, figure out how you want your system to work. Do you want people to put in a username password, or do you want a password of the day or of the week? Depending on how exactly you want people to connect, it's going to impact how you want to set up the system. Let's see if it rebooted already. All right, there we go. So now we're on local authentication. And so when you're using local authentication, you have to create some local accounts. Those can be individual accounts or they can be shared accounts. If you click on Add Modify User, you can see the accounts that are in the system. By default, there's a guest account. This guest was a test account. We can delete that. But this is the default account that's always in there, called guest. You may want to change the name of it or remove it, but this is the default account that appears. Um, and so when you go to edit this user, or well, let's go ahead and make a new account. So let's make a new account, and let's call this a shared account. And so for a shared account, you'll need to figure out when you want the account to expire. And that means people who use this account will get the message, this account is expired after this date. I think it defaults to about a month in the future. So you could set it up to 30 years from now. It just depends on when you want your accounts to expire. For a shared account, you don't need an accumulation limit. We can talk about that later. But you'll want to set your user login type to be unlimited PCs, which means that any number of users can connect to this shared account. The other thing you'll want to think about is the bandwidth limit. By default, the gateway controller has a dynamic limit, which means it takes the total bandwidth available on system that you've told it in the WAN LAN properties, and it balances the request for that bandwidth. So if you have 100 megabits and there's 100 people who all want the maximum possible, they'll get 1 megabit each. If there's only one person on the system, they can have all 100 megabits. So it's not always, even though one person could get 100 megabits, it's not necessarily always a good idea to give them 100 megabits. So you can set more of a fixed limit, and this will be per account. So say 100 people connect, then each of them can get up to 1 megabit, or each of them can get up to 4 megabits. If you set this much higher than 2 or 3 or 4 megabits, you may run into problems where, and you can use a custom amount that's even higher. This only goes up to 8 megabits, but if you want 50 or 60 or 90 megabits, you can define that as a custom bandwidth profile. But if you give users 8 megabits, you may find that they're connected to an access point that doesn't have enough throughput to give everyone 8 megabits. So even though there's 100 megabits available, if that AP is out of bandwidth, then people still may not be able to get on. So the best practice is to figure out how much bandwidth you're planning on providing to guests and set that limit here. If you need an account that has more, you can always create a special account for the staff or for the general manager and just let them use the dynamic limit, which is pretty much whatever's available. So we can add that user, and now you can see when we go to our account list, here's our new account. So another kind of account that you might want to add is an account that has where you create a number of accounts that kind of have a rolling code. And sometimes people do this by the month. So say we have a January code, and we want that to expire in 2016 on January the 31st. Again, this is going to be a shared code. So if you give out the January code, everyone can use it in January. If somebody comes back later, or they swing by and they're parked in the parking lot and they try to use the January code in February, they're going to get an expiration message. And then presumably for this site, we'd create a February code, and et cetera, et cetera. You could do daily codes this way. The database holds up to 2,000 codes. You could do weekly codes. Really kind of depends on what kind of codes you want to use. So the other kind of account you could use is you can create an account that's specific to an individual. And so you could make Joe's account that's just for Joe. And furthermore, you can lock this to a single PC, which means as soon as Joe logs in with his account, it's going to get locked to his device. This is often used with something like prepaid cards, where you're going to charge for someone. And when you have accounts that don't need to be shared between multiple devices, you can also set a time limit in the account. So say we want to sell Joe, 100 minutes of access time. I guess you can only give him 60 minutes. 100 minutes would be, what, an hour and 40 minutes. Okay. So here's 100 minutes for Joe. You can also decide when Joe connects, do you want his time to run continuously? Meaning as soon as he connects, whether he logs on or off, and whether he's idle or not, his time's going to expire. Or do you want him to be able to log in 10 times, over 10 different days, as long as he doesn't exceed this total time? If you want his time to run continuously, use nonstop accumulation. Otherwise, the regular accumulation will just count what's in his account. So in two cases, Joe's going to get an error message if his account's expired, because the expiration date is gone, or if he's exceeded his accumulation, he's going to get a message that there's no more time in this account. The other option you have for Joe is you could set it to MAC address pass-through, which means when he connects with his single PC, he won't get another login page. He'll just get pass-through based on the MAC address. The other thing that will happen is, if it's set to single login, is when Joe connects with his iPhone, it's going to capture the MAC address of his iPhone. If he connects later with his laptop, he's going to get an error that this account, is already in use. So another option you can use is to use a user count. And this will basically determine how many simultaneous devices can use this account. And this is popular for things like, say you have accounts that are based on room numbers. Like you could have room 114. And room 114 is limited to 3 devices. So the first, second, and third connections to this account are fine. In this case, you don't want to use an accumulation limit. Well, you could, but all the devices will use that limit. But you could set 100 minutes for 3 devices. But typically, multiple users on one account don't have an accumulation limit. But in this case, the fourth connecting user will get an error message that this account has exceeded the usage for that account. And again, you'll probably want to give them some reasonable bandwidth limit. Each connection will get this amount. It's not divided up between them. So if you have 3 users for one account, they could be getting 2 megabits each, up to 6 megabits. So that more or less covers adding and modifying users. So another useful feature you can use is you can automatically create blocks of accounts that are the same. This is useful for something like prepaid cards. Like say I want to make a bunch of 1-week cards that all have 24 hours in them, and they're all going to expire a week from now. They're going to use nonstop accumulation, and they're going to be set to single PC login and 2 megabits. So click OK. So now I have a profile for the default, and now I can create 25 user codes. So now I have these 25 codes. The username and password is the same. If I go to the user database, I can see them in here now. I could export these and print them on prepaid cards or just give them out as slips of paper. That can be a useful way to give out codes. So another thing that's useful is if you do need to create large blocks of accounts, especially for rolling codes, we do have an Excel tool that you can use. So you can see here I created a list of a couple hundred at least of these random accounts. And then what you do is you put in the expiration date, you put in the account properties if you want them to be single account, user count, or single account, or MAC address pass-through. And then I can use this to actually generate a database, so I don't have to go in and create all those counts by hand. You could also create your own tool to do this as well. The user database is an XML file, but we've done it for you here. So if you'd be interested in using this tool to create codes or help manage your database, contact sales. That's a tool you can use. So that pretty much covers how to create accounts for local authentication. The next topic that you want to think about is customization, and this is going to control kind of how the login pages look and how users go through the system. So the most basic is the login page. The first option is a pop-up. This used to be popular, but not so much anymore. A lot of browsers block pop-ups by default, so unless you have a specific reason to use a pop-up, I wouldn't recommend it. There's also a default page that you can use. It's a pretty generic page. You can make some basic changes to it. We can get a preview of what it looks like. So here's what that page looks like. It's got some social media links on it. It's got that default banner. So if we change the banner, we would see the new banner up there. You can also change these fields. So say we want to call this room number, and we want to call this code. Let's see. I'll probably have to save it. Let's see if I save it, if the new one will come up. Yeah, there we go. So that'll give you an idea of what your page is going to look like. This looks pretty similar to the internal template. And then the two pages you can use that are actually a customized web page where you can do whatever you want. You can format it however you want, create multiple pages, images, buttons, do whatever you like. I know we provide some professional services too, so if you'd like us to design a special page for you, we can do that. So you can either host that externally, and for external portals, we give you the portal code. Let's see, where that probably appeared in the background. Yeah, see, sometimes this happens, is when you spawn one of these windows. Here we go. It may appear behind your other windows, so if you have buttons that don't seem to be doing anything, make sure you look around. So basically, just on your external portal page where you have all your content in your help system, and maybe you've got a billing system, whatever else you have, this is the post code that you need to use to connect to the controller. This would be something for your web designer. A little more straightforward is to use the internal portal, and I think that's what we're going to use for now. And going back to the uploaded pages, internal portal is this file, internal portal.htm. You can see we just have a default page for it. And if we looked at this page, it pretty much looks exactly the same as our default page. It's very similar. And then if you don't want to redirect people at all, but give them a fixed URL, you can do that as well. It's not a very popular option, but some people's systems do require that. So another way you can customize the login experience is by providing links to any social media accounts associated with the site. So you can see here, we've got a TripAdvisor link, we got a Facebook link. This goes to the Daily Show, but your link probably would go to the hotel and a Twitter account. And as we saw on here, this gives me a link to Facebook, and it's for the account that you configured. So if you want to get some likes on Facebook or get people to make TripAdvisor recommendations, if you uncheck these, then they won't appear on the page. So let's do the preview. Again, it's probably in the background. There we go. So whether or not you want those links to appear, you can configure that there. The other part of authentication that is important that you can configure is what happens after users connect. So this is called the post-authentication. So after someone logs into the system successfully, and this includes the automatic login system as well. So you can send people to this page even if you're using automatic authentication or any other authentication methodology. And your options are, you can send them to their original request, so whatever page they requested that spawned a login page, they'll get sent to that request. This isn't always the best option because someone's original web page request may not be a real browser request. It could come from a toolbar, it could come from something in the background. And so when the authentication system, when they post that login page, or especially for the automatic authentication system, when you tell the browser to send them back to that web request that came from their Yahoo toolbar, there may not be anything to display. So you can get kind of funny results by sending people back to their original request. It's much better to send them to a known location. And if you're doing something like a hotel, they usually want them to go to the hotel page anyway. But in any case, any kind of a welcome page, branded hotel page, if you're an ISP and you have your ISP welcome page, this is kind of the best option, so you can control their experience after they log in. You can also send them to an internal welcome page, which is called postauth.htm. You can store that on the controller in your file system. Down here, postauth.htm, and you could add as many images and functionality to that as you wanted. Just like you have this default login page, you can have a custom welcome page. You can see what that looks like. Pretty generic. You can put whatever message you want on there. So my recommendation is use a branded welcome page. That's the best option. But you can consider these other options depending on the requirements of your system. The other way you can allow people to connect in addition to the authentication system is you can give people limited time free access. For instance, if maybe you've got a hotel lobby and you want to give people a half hour or an hour to connect before they check in. Maybe you're using a PMS based authentication. So this would be a way to give them without having to be checked into the hotel, they could still get on, but they can't sit there all day. You could use this on your external portal as well. Here's the code for that. And then here you just configure how long the reset period is. 24 hours is once a day. How many minutes they can get. And then for each device, once they've exceeded this time, they'll get a message saying, you've used your free time today, and please come back tomorrow. You can, and then this access link. This is on if we let's go ahead and enable this. It's disabled now. Let's give people 15 minutes. And then now if I go up to preview my default page, I should see a link. Yeah, so here's my limited time free access. And here you see I got 15 minutes. Once that time expires, then I'll get logged off. I can still connect if I have a real account, and logging out won't stop that time. It's just 15 minutes. It's that non-stop accumulation that we talked about before. So these are basically your login page options. I mentioned that Apple's they spawn that login page. That's actually called CNA, Captured Network Assistant. If you want to disable that login window on Apple's, the only reason you would do that is if there's some problem with the login page. If you have a login page that's very sophisticated or uses, has, a video that you have to watch or has, a survey you have to fill out, that may not work in the CNA window because it's not a real browser. And in that case, those guests would not be able to connect from iTunes. They'd have to actually open up Safari. So if you do want to disable that, enable the CNA bypass, and that means that you'll bypass the CNA system on Apple devices. I wouldn't recommend enabling this, unless you've, got a reason. Some people say that it makes it easier for Apple users to connect. Some people say that it makes it harder. It's definitely make sure you understand that you're changing the behavior if you do enable this. Let's see. So we talked about the social media links. So you can also customize some of the standard messages. If you're using a logout window, you just saw that when I connected to the free account. But that's a pop-up, so often it gets blocked. You can redirect people when they log out. If you want to send them to some kind of a, thanks for visiting page, you can do that as well. So the place where you can really customize the experience that guests are going to have is by uploading pages into this file system. You can see there's lots of room in here for you to make a custom interface. And it all kind of starts with the basic internal portal page. So here's, let's see, so here was our terms of service. So here's the basic internal portal page. And again, I'm just going to use a text editor. So it has a bunch of JavaScript on it. If you have a web designer who wants to substitute their own, this is just some error correction and some checking to make sure fields are filled in. Actually, why don't we go ahead and bring up that page? Let's see. So are we still logged in? All right, so we'll log out. And then, oh, I guess we switched to, that's the no authentication message. So let's go to customization. Yeah, so we're set to no redirect. So let's use the internal portal page. You don't have to reboot for this change. And then let's connect again. And that default account is guest, so we can connect that way. Actually, let's go ahead and I think I have a custom page in here. All right, so we can connect as guest. So say I don't fill this out, you know, it says you have to enter password if you don't put in anything. So this is the kind of error checking that we're doing. If you want to replace that code, you can do your own error checking. This page is also mobile aware, so when I shrink it, it kind of shrinks down. The same thing will happen on a phone or other device. Again, your web designer may have his own mobile code, but this is kind of the default. So if I log in, then here's my default redirect. So going back here to this page, so if you are a web designer, you have a web designer, you can change any of this code except for this post form. So you've got this, let's see, yeah, so here's the form, and this post form kind of continues down here. So this is really the code that you can't change, or if your web designer wants to customize it and move things around, just make sure that they're posting this code to the correct place, that they're using the correct input types. Otherwise, you're going to get an error back from the gateway controller that that it's an invalid login request. So most of the changes you make to this page will just be formatting changes, changing the banner like we showed, but you may want to use borders and buttons and lots of customized content. One thing that you can do that's useful is if you don't want guests to put in username and password, you can actually edit this code so that they just have a single access code, and that's actually a pretty popular option. It's one less thing for people to put in, and I guess people just like it better. So we have some sample code on how to do that. Your web designer could certainly do this on his own, but if you take a look, so here's some sample code that we wrote. Here's our standard form. The difference is, in the old form, we had two inputs. We had an input for username, we had an input field for password. If we look at this form, you can see, let's see, right, so we only have an input for password. And up above, we've actually taken the username input, made it into a hidden field, and it's always guest. So now when users get this page, it's just going to say enter password, or it's going to say enter access code. So this would work well like for your rolling codes where you have the code of the day or the code of the month, for people to just put in that code. So what we'll need to do is, so let's take this code, so we'll get rid of this file, and then we'll rename this, because when we upload it to the controller, remember it has to have the same name that it had before. So we'll rename it to internalportal.htm. We'll go back to our controller. Upload pages, and let's upload that over our internal portal file. So then we'll have our new internal portal. Now it says default, so that's good. We know we have the right file name. Let's log out from here again. And then when we go to our access, so now we just have an access code. Now the account is still guest, so our access code is guest. I don't know, it's running slowly. So looking at the login code, you can see there's lots of things you can do. We have a few different template files for if you want to use the same username password. I showed you this tool you can use, so this can be helpful if you want to create a whole bunch of codes, especially if you want to do prepaid cards. You could have one list of you could have a list of 2,000 prepaid codes here, generate all the accounts for them, and then print the cards, and give the site a box of cards and a file to upload. I actually didn't show that, but so when you want to add users to the database, if you go to System Tools, you can go to Import Local Database, and then let's see, I don't know if I have a database in here, but if I have a database I created, then open that and upload it. And then when you import that, that'll write the new database in. So if you did that and sent them all the cards, then you'd have kind of a matching set of prepaid cards and accounts to go with them. So that's pretty much the overview of kind of the basic authentication options. The most popular is usually just to use an internal portal page, customize it a little bit, maybe get your terms of service in there, customize the banner, make the colors and images look the way you want, and then upload that to the file system. But some people use terms of service as well. So a few other options that are a little more advanced is there's full radius support. So if you're a radius user, you know about that. So you can use radius. You can send us any questions you have that are specific to radius, or take a look at the documentation. You can also use the PMS-based authentication system for Micros or for Galaxy. Again, you know if that pertains to you, and it's a little more complex than kind of these basic settings. And then there's also an interesting option to do authentication based on email. And what this will do is this will require users to put in an email address, and then once they put that in, they can get access to the system. It doesn't really control their access, but it'll allow you to kind of harvest all those email addresses, and it does some basic checking to make sure that it's likely to be a real email address. And the customers that we've had using it say they get about 90 or 95% people's email addresses, and there's ways for them to export that and see that collection of email addresses. So that pretty much covers the authentication system. I hope this answered some of your questions. Definitely take a look at the documentation. It has some pretty detailed step-by-step scenarios for different setups. And you can always send us any inquiries at support@valuepointnet.com. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.